But like when I'm multitasking, I mean, I remember there was a time when it's like I was doing Marvel's Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., The Walking Dead, and Outlander at the same time. Okay, so it's like big bombastic Marvel with a full orchestra every week, horror with a small little Bernard Herrmann ensemble, and then I'm writing themes with bagpipes. Like cross-pollination is not a problem at all.
Yeah.
Did you play Telling Lies,
Zal?
Sam Barlow?
I did.
Where it's all the like one-sided of Skype calls and stuff, where you would watch actors be like, right. And like, and you're not hearing that. I loved that. I thought that was an amazing way to tell a story.
I feel like Sam and I either were not friends at that point in our lives or something. No, you know what it honestly would have been?
You mean back then?
Yeah. I'm not saying that this is the most fucking narcissistic conversation we could. Please don't use this.
Okay,
You're
I'm
gonna use
ready.
this.
I'm going, of course.
100%. It's a challenge for success is a problem. And you've experienced this too. It's like, oh, he's the indie guy. You're like, well, no.
Oh, I see. Like he's the Her
Done.
Story guy.
Yeah, so it's there is a problem with someone
Kai
going
Lang.
clearly with someone going, oh, that's Troy Baker in the game. Now I'm completely taken out. But I don't know how many people, most people don't recognize me necessarily from my face. It happens occasionally, but it's more than anything, they see the name and they're like, is this you? So I think that there's a problem sometimes with being recognized and that actually becoming an obstacle for an immersive story, like
So wait.
like Telling Lies or Her Story or anything else. Like if it had been anybody else, there's a part of me that would have been like, I'm watching X do this role. You know what I mean?
How is that Sam's fault? Are you saying,
Well, he
because
casts
I thought, oh, okay. I thought you were going to say,
He's responsible for the casting.
well, right. I didn't realize it was cast specific. I thought you were saying that because I thought you were saying that the common thread that it had with Her Story somehow pulled you out of it. Like it felt like, you know, being the victim of his own success, where Her Story was so amazing that anything that's remotely in that vein kind of feels second tier. Abzu had this problem
No.
to a
Oh, I see what
degree
you're
where
saying.
people are like, oh, it's Journey 2, which is cool and all, but Journey is the better one. Fortunately, I think that's a minority opinion. I think Abzu has a lot going for it. And similarly, I thought Her Story was amazing. If anything, I liked it more than Telling Lies. I mean, I liked more
Telling
than Her
Lies.
Story.
I feel like everything he's done has been a progression towards. And
Well,
it may
there's-
not be your cup of tea, but I don't think he's ever moved backwards.
Oh,
like,
no,
I feel
that's for sure.
it's the same thing with like Play Dead, where you've got, Limbo is amazing. Inside is like, holy shit, but it's not. Some people look at that and go, oh, I can totally tell that the same studio
Right.
that made Limbo made Inside. I don't ever feel like it's a regression from that. I think everything is a progression and is building on top of it. There's a really interesting interview that I saw on TikTok talking about, there's an interview, had to have been in the 80s with Jack Nicholson. And he apparently turned down both Godfather and The Sting. And he
Interesting.
looks and he goes, I think that Last Detail is in some ways for me a superior film. I think Godfather is a wonderful film, clearly. He goes, I always wanted to work with Marlon Brando. And I said, it's going to have to be at a different time because this is not the right movie for me. And you could see in the interview where they're like, do you consider that a regret? He was like, I think that I had. He's like, I'd like to think, no, I know that I had the business acumen at the time to understand what I was giving up. But he knew that that would not be the right movie for him.
Boy,
We'll never know.
we'll never know, but it is hard to picture.
Anybody else. You saw years ago, Coppola released the Dreamcast list that he had that was just constantly like all the names he was scratching out that were the big names at the time. You're like, who is that? But the only one that didn't change, like Martin Sheen was supposed to be in there. I think Robert Duvall is the only one that didn't change.
I did not see that.
I may be wrong. Time is not our friend. I understand. So I want to be. You have something very exciting.
Yeah, I'm gonna do something a bit different today.
Oh God.
And I know.
Off
Can you
come the
handle that?
clothes.
Yeah, this one is gonna be. We're at new platform. We're doing these on OnlyFans from now on. So I probably should have cleared that with you.
Here's something funny about that. In some way, OnlyFans is like shaving your head. Everybody should probably do it once just to find you. Got to know what your head looks like.
Oh my God.
You gotta. There's a
Dude,
part of
I'm
you
convinced that my head is so misshapen. I do not want to fucking shave this thing.
You're probably right.
No, I'm doing something very different today because I have a friend joining us.
You don't have any friends.
Well, let's find out about that. Let's let the cards fall where they fall.
Shut your fucking mouth. Get on here, you big sexy beast.
Slowly but surely. There we go.
Hey, gang.
First of all, is that a 47 you're using as your talkback?
You know,
That sets the tone pretty immediately for this thing.
I gotta sound good, bro. I gotta sound good.
Here's a 251 that I'm just kind of using as my Skype microphone. Dude, first of all, let's just look at what's happening behind you. That is,
This is where
one of the
I
sexiest.
Don't have quite enough channels.
Good
you
God.
can't even see them all. I'm running out of space, man. Running out of tracks.
Do you?
But,
I gotta know. Hi, Bear. First of
Hi.
all, you and I always just have fleeting, passing exchanges, and it's always like we'll call Dream whatever. It's about that all. It's always backstage or we're being shuttled past each other. I love that it took this rapidly. He looks like the Play-Doh dolls, where if you just kind of squeeze the head down, more hair comes out from all sides. I can always tell in what stage of development he's in by you relatively. This remains your vibe. Like I've never seen you you can tell Bear's really in the trenches right now because he's let himself go. You always have this. You could work at the Magic Castle or be a composer.
All of the above, man. I mean, it's funny. I just put out my first metal record, right? But I started growing this out about 7 years ago. And part of me was wondering, so when I share a picture and I'm playing a guitar, and is anybody gonna be? And I'm like, here's my metal record now. Is anybody
Surprised?
gonna be surprised? And I think the answer is no, actually. Which was
Definitely tracks. It definitely tracks. Yeah. When I found out you were doing a metal record, I'm like, yeah, kind of about damn time.
not bad for an accordion player, to be like, no, he's the most metal accordion player ever.
Hold on a second. Is that your primary instrument?
I'm a keyboard player, and keyboards and accordion and hurdy-gurdy were like the main instruments for a long time. But when I was a kid, it was just piano, man. I was a keyboard guy,
Okay. If you were to look at Yes, is that a standard for you, or is that just like a footnote? Are they the Beatles or are they Kiss to you as a keyboard player?
So here's the thing. For me, the ultimate keyboard band was Supertramp.
How? Really?
Bloody Well Right, and that opening Wurlitzer solo, which I used to know, but don't. I was like, and then it's like the groove comes in. It's like, oh, it's so sick. It's so awesome. But then it was ultimately Pink Floyd, man. It's
Okay.
Rick Wright and those keyboard solos in Shine On You Crazy Diamond and all
Yeah,
that.
dude.
I was like, whoa. But the truth is, like, I never liked being keyboard guy. I never I always wrote big bombastic music that featured orchestra and guitars, and like the keyboard was always a method to like get my ideas out.
It's a sketch pad.
Yeah, and I'm really, really glad I had those skills, man. I mean, the keyboard's the only instrument you can play down here and you can play up there, and it's easy. You know what I mean? It's
Sure.
so it's great. But yeah, man. So I actually added guitar pretty recently to be able to play the parts that I wanted to play when I started doing my record live.
Do you hear it in, this is my problem, as speaking about someone who's made albums, before I would always, I think there's a difference between farming and hunting. And I think before I was hunting, I hear the full produced sound. I hear the entire thing. I know how many minutes it is. I know how many bars it is. I know exactly what the guitars, bass, drums, keys, strings, choir, harmonica, whatever is featured. I hear it top to bottom, soup to nuts. The problem that I found is that my imagination quickly, immediately surpassed my level of ability.
Yeah.
So I would find people that would be able to play bass, drums, guitar, piano, harmonica, whatever. And I would go, so here's what I'm thinking, and literally just do what you were doing. Like someone came in one time for a horn session. They're like, do you have charts? And I went, no.
That's exactly what I was about to bring up. I was going to say, it's interesting to hear you describe it that way, because if you recall, the first time we ever met was at Rob's studio.
That horn section at Rob's.
When you were laying down, like it was like 3 players, I think, wasn't it? Or
Super easy, like mini, tower power horn section. So I had horn, bass, and sax, and it was the horn section from Mars Volta. So I mean, these guys are cats, right? And they're picking up my session for an easy, $200 each or whatever. But they came in, they're like, "Where are our charts?" I was like, "I don't have anything." I said, and they're like, "Well, we kind of came up to run it back," and they literally on the fly were like, "We could probably do this," and I was like, I want this to sound more like Tower, and it needs to be like, and they were like, play that again. I was like, and we literally charted it out that way. Now that's as close as I've ever been able to get out of my head through the instrument and processes of somebody else. But with you, A, what did you farm out to somebody else? B, do you hear tune, melody, lyrics, and then it evolves as you produce, or are you hunting the version that's in your head?
These are great questions, and it
let me complicate it before you jump in, because I would love
Shut
to
up,
know.
Austin.
I know. Sorry, am I interfering with this this date? I would be curious if the answer to that is different on the record versus day by day.
Way to be topical.
on the job. Yeah, well, that is funny enough. That is very much what we're here to talk about. So
Okay.
But that makes perfect sense, right? Because the way I've been making most of the music I've made over the last 25 years is for someone else's story, right? So whether it's a film, a video game, or a TV show. So that is a different process for me than making my own record. In fact, because it's a different process is why I made the record. It's to have that other process, to have a different creative relationship with the material, to have more autonomy, to have more, ultimately more pressure, way more pressure making a record than doing a film score.
Why? How?
Oh my God, because it's like
says as he
a film
finishes
score is like
season 2 of Rings
a film
of Power.
score is like a coloring book. I mean, I say
That's exactly what I'm saying. Like, you're a nerd, right? So it can't be lost on you. Holy shit, I am now essentially creating canon for Tolkien.
Sure.
But then you also have all of these other established IPs that are equally maybe smaller, beloved, foundation and so all. What do you how do you man, these are so many questions. How do you divorce yourself of the weight of expectation? B, how is that easier than just being all of the clasps are off and I can do whatever I want because I'm not having to meet the demands of producers, rights holders, audience, all that?
Yeah. All right. I'm going to answer all your questions. Here we
Go.
Good luck.
I've always loved collaborating with people. What do I farm out? Like, well, as much as I can, because I always want to be the least qualified person in the room. I want to have a great guitarist play my guitar parts. I want to have a great violinist. I want a great vocalist. I want a great lyricist. Even if I'm co-involved, I learn things from all these people, you know? Like even on my record, there's 25 songs. There's, I believe, one that is music and lyrics by me. That's it. Everything else, I'm like collaborating with people, and I've got all these different singers. I mean, my record is a living embodiment of this idea. But with that said, I am also a control freak. So much of the creative process comes right here in my studio. I figure out the horn parts. I've never had the experience that you described. Even when I was a kid in high school, I never had it because I would always figure out how to, if not have it on a piece of paper, I'd have a demo. I'd play the recording. It's this. But early on, I figured out how to get it on paper. To me, that was part of it. And I am working on demos here that I learned this skill making movies and games and TV scores with the demo being really precise. I actually get into the weeds enough that I'm like, one electric guitar does this, a second is going to be here, I'm going to notch out those frequencies, and a third tremolo part will fit here. The drums are going to be this, the strings will fit here, then there'll be a vocal here. But it's like solved. And when we bring in the players, they make it better, but it is very much not a band jamming.
So even on this one,
if anything, what's interesting is that all the musicians that I've ended up working with are so good and so accomplished that routinely all of them say the following things to me. They say, well, I mean, I would never write a drum part like this. This is crazy. And I go, oh, well, you can change it. And they go, no. I'm going to figure this out. There's a way to do this, you know, and I've heard that from people like Gene Hoglan, one of the best metal drummers of all time. And he would say, no, I'm going to figure this out. It's like a challenge. Or even I'm working with Slash and he's like, man, this is crazy. And I'll be like, well, we can change it. He's like, no, I love this. I would never think to do this, you know? And in a way it becomes a symbiotic relationship. That's my version of what you were describing, of that collaboration, even though I'll come to it with more written out literally and metaphorically. There's definitely a sense that I want someone to make it their own, and I enjoy working with people for whom that's the thrill, right? That it's like I think that musicians can walk into a room and it's like, oh, there's no rules, let's just jam and we'll figure it out. And they can also enjoy almost the opposite, where they listen to the demo and go, oh, damn, you have figured this out.
Right.
Okay, let's get into the weeds and figure this out. And I think that is rare in rock. I'm just going to say it's rare. Why is it rare? Because I've spent 20 years learning how to like do these demos that are so complete that as an artist, I'm coming into a band situation unintentionally with more figured out than I think most rock musicians are used to. It's just
funny how I think also just the nature of our world works, the way sessions are planned. We just end up being hardwired for the idea of when you're in the room and there's a red light on, you are burning daylight every second. I was reading, John Burlingame wrote this recent book about the history of television music, and it talked about how they hired like Benny Goodman or somebody to write it. I kept blanking on who it was, but there was a kind of jazz, stalwart who was hired to write a TV theme in like the late 50s, and how they went into the studio with their band and like 14 hours later didn't have anything.
Whoa.
and it was like the AFM and everybody is going, this is not how this goes. This is not how this is
Hey
supposed
man, I
to
gotta
operate.
find it, all right? I gotta feel it,
I know.
baby.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, what's
Well,
funny,
we better find it.
Yeah.
you know, the idea that like to make a rock record used to be, you know, you rent a studio for 6 months.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, bro.
and you're working out material. But here's the thing. I made a record the same way, fundamentally. I worked on my rock record for 5 years. But that process was largely me in this studio and my brother Brendan in his studio. And we passed files back and forth. And we did over and over and over the things a band does. It just took us 5 years instead of 5 months.
Yeah.
But
Was
I mean,
it
really,
painting
he
or was it
the-
sculpting? Was it writing or was it removing?
Both, because my brother is an excellent producer, and I made a vow when I brought him on. I go, I'm going to do everything you suggest, even if I don't like it,
Wow.
and we'll see. So he. What I love about him is he's ruthless. When he listens, he doesn't put it on the studio monitors. He goes for a walk with the dog and just puts it in his ear. He puts it in his ears, and it's like the instant he gets bored, the instant he's like, he describes it as when he's like this, it's good. And then once in a while he'll just go, huh? Oh, okay. But when that happens, you got a big problem.
Huge.
You got a big problem. So he would go, he would say things as devastating as like, I don't think your chorus is the chorus. I think your bridge is the chorus.
Wow.
This chorus is like, use it as an outro, or just, honestly, it's just like, the verse is good, the rest, scrap it for parts. I mean, he would just, and I would go like, okay, I'm going to do that. You know, and if he's wrong, it'll be clear, right?
I've had
So
somebody tell me
that-
before too, where it was like, you know, you have two songs that you have somehow put these together, and they're two separate songs, and you're
That happens to me
afraid
all
that
the
you
time.
don't. Yeah, you're afraid. I am afraid that I don't have a second verse. I'm afraid that I have a first verse, a second verse that's really from a different song, or a bridge that belongs to this thing. And so I'm just like, well, here I've got my 3.5 minutes, so now I'm complete. As opposed to learning how to be. There's a difference. I had this conversation with my assistant earlier this week. There's a difference between patience and waiting. Having patience is an active activity. Waiting is a very passive one. And so for me to be patient with the song, my first album was 10 years in the making. My second was, 5 to 6 years. And I think that had nothing to do with even the process of writing. It was just like, okay, these things have been in the oven long enough. Get them out now to make room for the other ones that are coming in.
So true. It's so true. And to be open to that, my version of what you have said is I am the process of writing a song, ultimately any piece of music, but you and we're talking about songwriting. The process of writing a song is listening to the song. You aren't telling the song what it's going to be. You are laying back and letting the song tell you what it wants to be. And my
Dude.
brother and I would use that language a lot. This wants to be 2 songs. I remember hearing that a lot. This wants to be 2 songs. And one of them might be a good song and the other one
Are there
not.
2 on the record that at one point had a shared
that were
start?
conjoined?
Yeah.
No, because in the case of the conjoined twin, you can only save one, in my
Dude.
opinion. What it meant, when you had 2 songs, it meant one of them was great and the other was filler. And
Just
you
taking
pull it
oxygen out of the room.
Yeah.
You guys
And
have
also,
already
you look
moved
at my
down the
record-
road, but I am still 100% stuck on this beautiful divot that you've created, this wonderful mental pothole of the difference between telling the song what it is vis-a-vis prescriptive versus listening to what the song is. And that to me is been my biggest struggle in anything that I do creatively. Directing this thing right now, and Austin and I were talking about this the other day. There's a huge difference between me wanting to give direction, quote unquote, in a prescriptive way rather than in a descriptive way, which allows that actor to then have this, oh, I have an idea. I'm like, bullshit, I gave you that idea. But I soft served it up to you in such a way that it's now your own thing. But that to me is it's not unlike what you're talking about, because if I want to force feed this song, you will have strings. You will have a whirly with a, or a B3, or you will have this, as opposed to, there's one song specifically on my second album that we did that I wrote on piano. It is a piano song. That is how this song was supposed to be written. My wife, I wrote it for my wife. She loves piano. It was meant to be on piano. We go into the studio to record it. I've told this story a lot, but I'll tell it for your own purposes very quickly. We're up in the Bay Area, out past Marin, like up in Mount Tamalpais. Beautiful studio up on top of a mountain, overlooking the ocean. It was gorgeous. We're there for 2 weeks. We live there, eat there, sleep there. It's the way to do it. We're writing there. It was incredible. One night, and we would do a song in the morning, we'd do a song in the evening, and maybe kind of jam as the night wore on to see if anything cool popped up. That specific night, our session was going to be this song called Hyde Park. Our friend C-Ray, who's an amazing producer and musician and songwriter, was like, gentlemen, tonight...
slide guitar player?
Yes, he's like the #1 call pedal steel player. He goes, gentlemen, this evening I provided a buffet of cannabis for us all to enjoy. And so we promptly went down that rabbit hole, and our amazing keys guy, John Titterington, who's one of the best sidemen and one of the amazing songwriter and producer in his own right, at dinner, excuses himself from the table and goes up to his bedroom and then texts our production assistant, goes, hey, just want to let you know, I got it too high and I feel that will be affecting tonight's workflow. So we were like, well, we're not going to record that song instead. And so what we ended up getting was this total B-side that no one will ever really hear. And that forced the production of this song to punt to a different session at Capitol Records, where we were supposed to do gang vocals and some BGVs, but we have extra time. You want to grab an acoustic real quick? And all of a sudden that song became a drop D acoustic and vocal.
Wow.
And it's perfect. It's perfect that way. So that is not even necessarily me listening to the song, but me getting out of the song's way and allowing it to become something.
Way. And another thing to remember that reminds me, I always say, if I don't write this piece of music today, it'll be a different piece of music tomorrow. Because I'm different tomorrow.
Yeah, should be.
And that's why it's like, you're always listening. I think that's the single greatest advice you could sort of give anyone wanting to write music, or probably anything. But it's like, you have to have an idea that you want to explore. And the hardest part is then, once you use that to open the door, to then back off and let it go where it's going to go.
Okay, so the springboarding that into composition, film composition, you don't have 5 years or 6 years to be able to allow these ideas to germinate and go back and forth with your brother as he walks around and has a leisure stroll and is constitutional and gives these wonderful production notes. You've got 9 months, maybe 6 months,
Usually,
less?
Way less, yeah. But if you think about it, to come up with the theme, to come up with the idea, you've got weeks, days.
Fuck off, dude.
You know what I mean?
Okay,
I mean,
so how do you
remember
distill
reading
that
Jerry
process?
super
Goldsmith,
early. Like, they hire you before production begins. You could have a year. But ultimately,
But that's
I'm
pretty
often
rare.
hired on stuff, and where it's like, we want to hear demos in a week. Welcome aboard. Here's the movie, and that's it. You've got one chance to wow them with.
Okay, so 2 questions and follow up. Number 1, how do you distill the process that you're talking about? We didn't need that. We didn't need that.
No, I love it. It's good.
Sure. I don't even know what just.
Oh,
Oh, I love the future.
Yeah.
How do you distill the same process we were talking about as far as listening to the song and allowing it to become something else, finding your ways to collaborate with the different people? How do you distill that process down to meet the necessitation of production demands? Follow-up question to that, you, like my dear friend Austin here, I'm sure have a tendency to work on, I know, I look at your credits, you're all over the place. You're working on this, you're also working on this. How do you isolate and not cross-pollinate these ideas between projects?
the answer to both your questions is the same thing, because unlike making a record, there's this other variable, and that's the source material. What are you scoring? What is the project? That entity, I'm going to call it the story, because actually, whether it's a game, show, a movie. It is the
Should be
story,
story-based.
characters. That's what you're supporting. That, I'm trying to think of the right analogy. It provides the scaffolding. It provides the outline. It walks in like a gangster and is just like, yo, this is what we're doing. It makes so many decisions for you that it is your first impulse to go, oh, I think it's this. And then you follow that path. I don't want to say it's easy, but compared to making a record, it is easy compared to that.
I will
Is
say,
it the freedom of restriction?
one time I got hired by two things at the same time that had the same brief, just by coincidence. They both were like, here are references and here are the kinds of things that we want to look to inspiration. It was the same list on both. And so it was the first time I ever found a challenge to basically what you were just saying, Bear, where normally, yes, the context at hand forces you down a path that prevents that cross-pollination. But this was one where I was going, I have to really conscientiously wall these off from each other. But fate intervened and I got fired off of one of them. And so it solved that problem real easily for me.
There you go, man. I got to say, I'm very fortunate in the projects that I've had. And I've also, influenced that in that I have chosen some things and declined some things. Sure. When Battlestar Galactica came out, every call was like, we want taiko drums. And after a while, I was like, I
can't do that anymore.
I don't want to do that anymore. And I'm also fortunate that I'm not like, I'm not doing like multiple cop shows or multiple medical dramas or multiple racing games. Or it's like, and hats off to the people that do that. I mean,
like Dennis McCarthy juggling multiple Star Trek shows.
I would struggle, but like when I'm multitasking, I mean, I remember there was a time when it's like I was doing Marvel's Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., The Walking Dead, and Outlander at the same time. Okay, so it's like big bombastic Marvel with a full orchestra every week, horror with a small little Bernard Herrmann ensemble, and then I'm writing themes with bagpipes. Like cross-pollination is not a problem at all.
Yeah. Is that so because obviously you're going to be, and this is what I've learned by having these kind of conversations with Austin, so much of the tune and the melody will be informed by the root instrument, right? Like you mentioned, if you're doing something for Outlander, baked in is going to be, this would be very bagpipe forward, right?
Yeah, well, so, that I didn't answer one of your other questions, and that's
well, then how dare you, sir?
Forgive me. I'm so sorry. How do you incorporate that part of the process where you're learning from people and collaborating with people? I don't. When I started Battlestar Galactica, I didn't know anything about taiko drums. When I started God of War, I didn't know anything about Norse folk music. I found people that do, and early on, I integrated them into my creative process. Sometimes just as consultants, teach me, what are the ranges of these instruments? How are they used? What are their strengths? What are their weaknesses? If it's singing, what languages are being used? And I try to like download as much of that information into my brain as I can so that then I go, okay, now I need to start writing my own variations of that. It's all setting up guidelines, right? So that ultimately, at the end of the day, the guidelines are always the same. That's why I've often thought that, like, take a classic score like The Omen by Jerry Goldsmith, okay? That like I don't know where the idea to create demonic satanic mass with choir came from. It deservedly won an Oscar. But that it's like, if Richard Donner had said, I want a demonic mass called Ave Satani, and he hired someone other than Jerry Goldsmith, he would have gotten something similar. Like, there's a lot of people that probably could have done that. What makes that is that they hired Jerry Goldsmith. They gave him the same guidelines they'd give anybody else. And he went, I need a satanic mass, saying Ave Satani. And from there, yes, his skill, yes, his talent, but it's like from there, 99% of what we love about that score was decided in a split second by him. And so it's so much about our instincts, our personality. What's funny, Austin and I have demoed for the same things over the years. And it is funny how, given the exact same input, I'll be like, what did you do? And I'm like, you did that? Check out what I did. It's like completely
Wildly
different. Completely different. So that is where I think our personalities come in. And to fully answer your question, I'm talking about split-second decisions. I mean, it doesn't take years. It takes 2 seconds to go, I think I would do this. And then you got to realize, like, from there's a lot of things that have to happen. But I think I'm going to do a hurdy-gurdy solo. And Austin will think, I'm going to do a Viennese waltz. And somebody else would think, I'm going to do electronic music. There's no wrong answer. But it's like, I think that spontaneity is the key to film and games and TV, that you take these inputs and you get an idea and you run with it. And then ultimately the key to success is, how good is your first idea, and are you not an asshole? You get a decent good idea and you're a good person, you're going to make it. That's it. You're going to make it.
Damn.
You're coping with that?
I'm processing all of it, yeah, because it's just it's just so, people ask me this all the time, like, whenever someone goes, can you give me any advice, or how do you do this, or whatever, it is, and I'm not faulting anybody for this, because I've cleared that up myself, is like, how can you distill all the years of experience into a couple of sentences that will somehow allow me to benefit and bypass your process to get there, you know? And I had this moment this morning. I was at the gym, and I just was talking to my trainers, like, I would much rather have a conversation with the guy climbing the mountain than the one who claims to be at the top.
Yeah.
Because that guy is in it with me, right? So we can far better help each other than the person who knows how long ago made it there and goes, like, somebody asked me, like, when you first moved here, what did you do? I was like, God damn, that was like almost 20 years ago, man. I don't remember.
This is the
I had to
classic.
think back.
This makes me think of every student who goes to study film scoring in pretty much any university setting. Best case scenario, the majority of their teachers are people that were at least recently working in the business, but more often than not, it's what you're describing. It's somebody, like, I'll never forget going to USC 20 years ago, and they're like, so we need to talk about streamers and punches, and we need to talk about, you need to be able to orchestrate by hand. And there was a lot of people where I was going, I don't really think that that's going to be what I face when I fly the nest.
Well, what's funny is that I was in the same position at the same school a few years ahead of you, and it would be like, well, I mean, I'm already doing student films, and I'm like running, the filmmakers give me these little QuickTime files, and I'm not doing that at all. Are you sure about that? Because, like, I'm already more efficient. I'm 19 years old doing a student film, and I'm like already like going circles around like the click book and SMPTE and timing out your lining up the ADAT recorders and all this stuff. Which, yeah, I mean that is the challenge of sort of the academic environment. Look, you cut to the chase, right? It's like, if somebody asks you, they ask the wrong question, but what they're actually getting at, Troy, it's what you were saying. It's like, give me something meaningful. I've run into you. I got 30 seconds with you. What can you tell me?
Right.
And for me, it always comes down to, the best advice is really just like, be a good person to be around. That's it.
Well, what you just said to me really, really resonates. Like, how quickly can you get to your best idea? Boy, that is what a great way to position yourself to be a problem solver and a collaborator. And secondly, don't be an asshole. Don't be the one who's like, do we have to get Bear? It's like, we want to work with Bear. We want to work with Austin. We want to work with Troy. And the reason why, somebody asked me, is like, well, you can hire somebody else besides Troy Baker. It's like, you absolutely can. Mm-hmm. Here's what you get with me. And I steal this from Austin all the time. I do not sell the end product. What I sell is the process by which together we will get there.
Bro,
that is what I
here's the thing,
sell.
Right? The end product is going to be AI for all of us.
Sure.
The reason you're going to work is because the experience of working with you is awesome. And
Yes.
truly, if somebody's like, well, there's an AI plugin that I type in, score this movie in the style of Bear McCreary, and I'd be like, oh, that's awesome. You should do
Go
that.
get it. You should 100% do
Seriously,
that.
Go do that. But like, if you want to hang out in my studio and talk about your movie and like have that experience and have me work really hard at it, the AI is never going to give you that, you know?
No.
It's so funny how every version. I recognize that AI is different, but every version of kind of digital technology that democratizes the process and makes it cheaper and all that sort of thing has waves of doom and gloom types that come along and say this is going to take all our jobs. You know, you don't have to read music anymore to write music. You don't have to be able to produce sheet music. And there's a whole generation of people who wrote by hand who are up in arms about it. And there's always a version of this that comes along. VSTs are taking jobs away. And I always look at that and can hear Richard Kraft saying, if there was a race to the bottom that you're describing, then John Powell and Elfman and all these people wouldn't have careers. You know how expensive it is to hire them, or Alan Silvestri or fucking John Williams? Like, clearly there's another variable. Anyway, that said, I want to unpack some of this music with you. And so first off, did you get, I put in the little chat here, an Audio Movers link.
Yes.
I would love to do, I'm not trying to derail our conversation.
Yes, you are.
But
you never let us have any fun.
I do relish the chance. Please use the little hand up when you want to speak, and you'll be called on by the moderator.
Yeah, okay, I'll get right on that.
There are so many places we could potentially start. But I think one thing I'm curious about is if there's any single track that's especially emblematic of any of the things that we've been talking about. There's so many places. I recognize that that's basically saying just,
are we doing
what
a
do you want to
surprise with that, or?
No, from the record.
Okay. From the record. Okay, cool.
Yeah, I'm assuming you haven't heard most. I don't know what you've heard of it, Troy. You mostly just know that it exists, I would think. But
exactly.
Because I will say, from my angle, when was it? When was Power Trip? October, I want to say.
It was October, yeah.
Angela and I go to this metal festival, and we're walking through a sea of 100,000 people, and she sees the back of a head and goes, "I think that's Bear." And
literally.
And I was like,
to her credit, it is a pretty recognizable silhouette.
There you go.
Although
I also was like, I took a look at the two of them and I was like, Austin must be here with her. I loved that you were there. But it was also,
denying that.
Yeah.
Oh no, I mean, that's been one of the best aspects of our dynamic is we'll go see like the Stones and Muse and
congrats,
AC/DC,
by the way. I'm so happy for the two of you.
Thanks, man.
Yeah, we'll talk about that for a quick second. He told me as I was driving, he's like, "Hey, I got to get ready for a call that starts in 5 minutes, but just real quick, check out what I did this weekend," and sent me a picture and then basically hung up.
Yeah, that's.
I was like, that was the most you thing that I've ever seen ever in the history of you. Yeah, congratulations, buddy.
No, Troy goes, "You asshole." That was his first words out of his mouth.
You know,
yeah.
Hallmark says pretty much the same thing on all their cards. "You asshole."
Yep. Fair.
All right, pick a track.
Yeah. Well, so in any case, there's so much to it, and there's so many kind of like there's like neighborhoods within it. You know, it's like we're looking at a Disneyland map where there's this portion and there's this portion, because obviously we have the bits with the actors, which is fun and relevant. I have my own sort of the ones that just really clicked with me and have lived in my head for the last 8 months or whatever since I first heard them. So, but I'm happy to follow your lead.
I'm curious to let you drive. I mean, like, I can talk about any of these for an hour. I'm curious which ones you want to talk about, Austin.
Well, the ones that I really, really loved were the ones where it felt like I could hear someone who's like a diehard fill in the blank admirer, Battlestar or Outlander or something, where they hear it and they go, that's like the DNA. Then it's like a cousin that then married into a very different family. And
totally.
It took on a totally different. So like the one that for me was the probably.
Jesus, I'm looking at this track list. Are you kidding me right now?
Pretty
Dude,
nuts,
this thing is a monster.
First of all, of course you did a 2-disc album. That's the most metal thing about it. I'm looking at this this album art, dude. And honestly, I don't know if I'm now viewing it through the lens of this conversation, but I definitely see the influence of Pink Floyd.
Thank you. I wanted to do I have a Word document that I started when it's like, I want to do a record. What are they going to do? And I just wrote the words heavy metal, Dark Side of the Moon. It was
Dude,
the first thing that came out. And that as like a guiding light. And somehow I think that cover art is what I just said.
it nails it. Absolutely nails it, man. And again, I don't feel like you're now aping that, but it definitely feels like everything that I want to do, I want it to be an homage and an honoring of all of the things that have influenced me. So you hit the nail on the head. And I'm looking at these credits. Lee Pace, first of all, genetically engineered human.
Yeah.
That first scene of season 2 of Foundation, I was like, well, great. I had to call my wife and go, I think I'm now gay. Because
I know, believe me. I think a lot of us had that same conversation.
his
My wife and
body
I
was
just watched it.
insane.
Just watched it recently, and I was like, that dude's 40. You know?
And apparently he was one of those people. There's two types of people who went into COVID. They were like, okay, I'm going to see how unhealthy I can get.
Yeah.
And then you have him, which goes, I'm going to lock myself up in my barn in Oklahoma and get ripped to shit. Just
All right.
insane.
In that case, I'm going to jump straight in on Blue Eyes.
Let's go.
And so you can
Satriani?
hold.
Car crash through the glass and just smeared across brickwork. I've choked. I've been choked. I've burned and I've frozen. Drowning, dehydration, decompression. What else? Oh, a wood-splitting axe. Deep into my shoulder. Honestly, I think I could spend an hour just listing weapons. And yes, old age. A few times. Much less than you'd think. Anyway, I don't particularly care how I die, to be honest with you. What matters to me is what I lose, who I lose, and whether or not that loss means anything. So you can kill me. But I promise that won't stop me. I will get my answers in this life or the next.
What just happened?
So I've got in addition to doing the Singularity concept album, I have a graphic novel out from Image Comics.
Of course you
What
do.
you just heard is a scene from the graphic novel. And there's 3 main characters in the graphic novel, and they appear on these 3 monologues. Lee does the first, Ryan Hurst does the second from God of War Ragnarok and Sons of Anarchy, and Denai Guerrera does the third from Walking Dead and Black Panther. So I wanted you to know that there's like a story here. And even though the album is super intense, these provide these like little chances to refuel for just a minute and a half before it sort of
flies
keeps
off
going
the rail
to
again.
something really dramatic.
Is that, do you feel, I may be projecting my own thing, but like I remember the first time that I heard Moody Blues. And I was absolutely enraptured by, Nights in White Satin to me is just one of the best. And there's some people that, they call it sentimental and over the top or whatever. But to me, it's
masterpiece.
Absolute masterpiece. Yeah. And I'd never in my life considered the power of spoken word and music. Because I always said, well, if there's lyrics, if there's words happening inside of a song, then they should be musical as well. Because otherwise they stand out and it's something completely different. But exactly what and if Lee, of course, just has his baritone is palpable.
There's a musicality to the way he talks.
There really is, but there's also such an ease to it. Like there's never an affectation. His intensity is so, in his performance at least, whether it be Halting, Catch Fire, Foundation, his intensity is so buried deep that I feel like I'm looking into him as opposed to just watching him show me how much power he has.
So to give you a little context, the premise of my story, there's this character with blue eyes. We only know him as Blue Eyes. And he dies after seeing this woman with yellow eyes appear above him, floating over him, looking down at him, and suddenly his entire universe is incinerated painfully and brutally. And he wakes up in a new universe. He remembers his old life, but he's in a new one. New species, new gender. He's just this happens again and again. It happens hundreds of times over the course of the story. And at this point in the story, it's early on, it's sort of in the first act of the story, that's what he's talking about, is all the ways he's died, because he's always looking for this woman with the yellow eyes. She always shows up right before he goes, oh shit, I'm about to die. He's understanding this rhythm. He doesn't know anything else about what he is. And I wanted an actor that had that gravitas, that weight, that could talk about dying over and over, and yet still he's likable and he's the protagonist and you're going to want to be with him for the rest of the story.
To me, he nails that on old age.
It,
yeah, to describe in visceral detail all the ways you're like, oh, that'd be a terrible way to die. But where I feel the most weight is when he says an old age.
Yeah,
it's like almost as if that was the worst.
Yeah.
How much of this?
Continue.
How much of this? What's the chicken and egg here in terms of the story, the graphic novel, and because especially if the rest of the songs are kind of adhering to the arc in some sense of the graphic novel, like
let me
walk me through that.
Let me correct you.
Okay, great.
So,
even better.
There is no chicken. There is no egg.
I spent 25 years writing music to shape other people's stories, and honestly, I couldn't do it anymore. I was gonna lose my mind, you guys. I was gonna lose my mind. So I said, I gotta express something for myself, or I'm not gonna be happy. So I wrote this record, the vast majority of it, in 2019, and laid it out, worked on the lyrics with my brother, brought in Serge Tonkian was the first guest singer, brought in some other, and started shaping up, and I was like, damn, this is awesome. I'm feeling good about this. But then I was like, as I was sequencing them, I was like, there's a story here. I feel story so intrinsically. I started realizing, like, damn, I can't escape story. I can escape film, television, and video games, but I can't escape story. And I realized I want to do a concept album, but most of the songs were already done. So I went to some friends of mine in the comic book industry, and I said to them, this guy Kyle Higgins, who's written Nightwing and a bunch of stuff, and he's got his own imprint right now. He's doing this Radiant Black series that he created. Yeah. So he's made his own comics, and I was like, how do you could we maybe make a graphic novel? But here's my requirement. Let's find someone who can help write a story with me. But here's my requirement. As much as I love the animated movie Heavy Metal, I do not want to do an anthology. It's too easy. And in a way, it's almost like begging for that, because a woman sings this, an old man sings this, a young man sings this. There's all these
finding cohesion is actually the harder challenge.
That's where the writer came up with this idea of a protagonist and antagonist that leap through universes and are reborn. So he shaped this story, and then we worked on it for a year.
And what's driving the shape? Is it lyrics? Is it the emotional statement that the songs make? Like, what influence are they exerting on the story?
It is both. But it's ultimately the emotion. Very little in the lyrics.
So they're more allegorical in a way.
And quite frankly, some of these songs have very specific stories that they're telling that are just straight up not in the comic book. For the reason that the comic book, I'm not doing like a rock opera. I never call it that. Because the comic book is, I put it through its paces. I think the story is great whether or not you have the album. And I say the same thing about the album. And the lyrics are very personal that my brother and I wrote, and even the ones I co-wrote with other people. I'm working with a Gaelic rapper. And his first lyric, it's about the loss of his language, how he lives in these small islands and there's elders. He was telling me one time, and he's like, this old guy died in this village that I grew up in, and like, I don't even know if there's anybody that speaks his dialect anymore.
Yeah.
And I was like, bro, we got to write a song about that.
Yeah.
So that, his opening lyric is growing up in Scotland in the 90s, ... So when I worked with the comic book people, I was like, we're not trying to make that, there's no world in which that carries over. This is personal, and take the emotion of that and make it this chapter. I ultimately wanted these two things to coexist.
Do you feel like there was a part of you, since this has been in you for so long, have you felt it kind of, Austin, I think you've experienced this before too, where these ideas, we're talking about the cross-pollination, even though you say these things are so totally different, here's sci-fi, here's fantasy, here's horror, here's, Scottish, hot men with plaids and their shirts off. To be able to have these ideas that are so they got to bubble to the surface in some way. Was there ever a moment where you're like, oh, this doesn't belong to you, and you almost want to like take it back and go, I'm holding this one back for myself?
Totally. What's so funny is you describing everything you just said. I literally do not know if you are describing my scoring career or the record that I just played. I literally do not know what you're talking about. Because It's both, man. And a lot of it is, some of it is ideas that didn't go anywhere, and it's like, dang, that ends up in a drawer, and then I go back to it and explore it again. Others are, I had so much fun doing this song in Gaelic with this guy, but then I found out he raps. Like, I can't put that in Outlander, but I went back to him and I'm like, man, let's do a song together.
Cool.
I do a song with Ivor from God of War. We co-wrote this song together, and so a lot of it is a direct extraction from my experience in film and TV. I mean, even I did a movie for the Angry Video Game Nerd. Okay, I did the Angry Video Game Nerd movie, and we did all these chiptune sounds, and I used them on my metal record in a song because I was like, that's too fun. I can't ignore this, So there's a lot of cross-pollination. The interesting thing that I think when I listen to my record, though, is I think that people listen to my music and Austin, you've often described, it's like, oh, Bear's got this sound that's like so gargantuan and so massive. It's like big, and I embrace that. But truly, like, my record, I think, reveals most of the time I got the breaks on me from producers. The solo record it's like there's even more that I want to do, and I can't, because it's like film, TV, and games. Like, there's just a limit to the amount of information and passion and emotion you can cram in before you're like overwhelming a project, So in a way, that's really what it came from, where it's like, this was awesome, but like, what I really want to do is get Gene Hoglan on double kicks and get drop guitars in B on this,
I really hope, I want to listen to more of this, but I'm really hoping that you looked at Slash and go, hey, can you change your tuning? Which, by the way, his new record, man, is insane.
Awesome.
I was like, who is that guy that's singing with him on that single that they dropped? Because he looks like Brian Johnson. And then all of a sudden, like, featuring Brian Johnson, was like, why hasn't that guy been singing down in that register his entire career? Because holy shit, that song is a barnstormer, man. It is incredible. It's so good, man.
It shows
I forget how talented Slash is, man.
Totally, and what how rooted in blues he really is. And you hear it in Guns N' Roses and Velvet Revolver, and his solo work, but it's always in the context. Funny you mentioned him, because one track that might be worth checking out, the track that features him and Joe Satriani. I wrote this song, it's called Escape from the Machines, when I was 15. I wrote it when I was 15, and a buddy of mine played guitar on it, because I wasn't a guitarist then. And so we recorded it on a Tascam 4-track cassette.
Hell yeah.
And that's actually what you hear in the beginning of the song.
Cue it up. I got to hear this.
And then you hear my buddy, whose name is, he goes by Malay now, and he's a Grammy-winning hip-hop producer, coincidentally. And then Gene Hoglan goes into this fill, and then the lick that I wrote on keyboard that my buddy Malay played, Slash plays. And then Joe Satriani does the improv solo. And then like the icing on the cake, there's a slap bass solo in the middle that I had imagined John Avila from Oingo Boingo playing.
Wow.
John Avila from Oingo Boingo playing it. And so it's like the ultimate wish fulfillment is that everybody I had daydreamed about being on this song is now on the song.
Wow, man.
I got it ready.
Go.
Bro, your face literally melted. It literally was a face melting solo.
Yeah, no shit.
Oh, it's so
I did
nasty.
I did not realize when I first listened to that the context of that first few seconds.
Yes,
that's
that's
awesome.
when I was 15.
That's literally
And just
like
the super, first of all, the super hard panning that's happening as well on top of it, just like and then bam, everything comes together. I don't know if I would have gotten that absent of you telling the story. You know what I mean? Like I would have thought that was an interesting mixing choice, but that's what you're talking about as far as the story is informing.
Yeah. And this is what I'm talking about, where it's like people like Slash, he made that lick his own to a degree.
Yes.
But then
This is
also like the bridge, he's in 5/4. It's really kind of proggy. It's not
Yeah.
a Slash friendly lick, but he was like,
No.
oh no, man, I want to do that. I want to like. He was so excited about it, and that's the fun. It's like when we work together, it's like he brings some Slashness to me, but also like I get him playing some stuff that he just wouldn't otherwise play, you know. And I remember when we were tracking that, this was the second of 2 songs he played on. We got to that part in particular, and I was like, well, you don't have to if you don't want to. He's like, no, man, I got to do this. This is so you. This is like classic McCreary. And I remember thinking like, holy shit, Slash likes my music enough to have an opinion enough.
No shit.
To say that. And he wasn't like, this is so you, just you do it. It was like, I want to do it,
Dude, for me, just a couple of points from
Couple of notes.
listening. I have a few notes, first of all.
Yeah, give me the notes.
Is it too late
I don't
to
know
give
who
you the
this
notes? Can we patch the
Satriani
record?
person is? Is he a beginner? Is he brand new? The handoff between the two of them is incredible.
Yeah, right?
Because a lot of times it's this is going to be the worst example of this, but it's kind of like this Glenn Fry meets Joe Walsh thing where I always felt like, all right, now it's my turn. They always felt like they were competing with each other as opposed to complementing each other. So what I felt from this was, to go back to your Jerry Goldsmith thing, here's the prompt, right? You gave the prompt and he goes, got it. Now I'm going to inherently, just by the way that I play, it's going to sound like Slash. And then immediately Satriani comes in. I'm like, that's 100% Satriani.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
And
like tones and I have no idea what he was looking at when he played, but instantly I'm just like, that's someone who sat back and watched what one person did and now stepped forward into their light and said, now I'm going to do what I do.
And I got to say too, I was understandably like cautious in how I approached Slash about this song as opposed to the other one, because it's like, well, there's another guitar god on it. I don't want you to do the improv solo. I literally, Slash, want you to play the parts as I wrote them when I was 15. I don't want you to change them, but what was so great, he's so collaborative. He was excited about that. And it was like all egos get set aside. And, he heard Joe went first in this case.
That was going to be my question, is where
Joe's solo is amazing.
You know the story about the Sistine Chapel, right? As far as you have Da Vinci who's up there, and first they bring him in. The cardinal brought him in and said, "Master, we'd like to commission you for a work." He goes, "Will this be in the basilica, I assume?" He goes, "No, actually, it's in a chapel off to the side." And he goes, "Okay, is it this big wall?" And they said, "No, it's actually the ceiling. And ceilings were reserved for the students." And he storms out. He was like, first of all, he had never painted anything. He was only a sculptor. And, not Da Vinci, Michelangelo, apologies. And he says, the cardinal, stupid piece of shit. So the cardinal chases after, he goes, Master, my apologies. We didn't mean to offend you. We thought this would be something that you'd want to do. It's fine. We have another artist. He's a huge fan of yours, as a matter of fact. And if you actually just look through this door right here, you can see he's finishing up this small mural in this other side wall, nowhere near as big as this. His name's Renoir. And so Michelangelo's like, what do you mean? And he looked and he saw what he was doing. He was like, give me the fucking brushes. And he climbed to the scaffolding and he started working. And then the cardinal goes in to a young Renoir and goes, you're not going to believe this, but I know you're such a huge fan of Michelangelo. He's actually down the hall working on this. If you look through this door right here, you can actually see him working. And he pitted the two of them against each other, the master and the apprentice, because he knew it would bring the best out of both of them.
That's fantastic.
So I can't help but think that, but it's also effective. You know what I mean? Like, nobody knows about that other mural, but they sure as shit know about the fingers touching.
This reminds me of, that reminds me of the story. I remember once asking how it was that the Branford Marsalis got involved in the Russia House, and Richard Kraft was like, Jerry goes, it would be awesome to feature, saxophone or something. And basically, Richard did exactly this. He essentially calls Branford Marsalis and goes, Jerry Goldsmith wants to write for you. Will you do it? And he's like, if I guess if Jerry wants me, and then he calls Jerry Goldsmith. Branford Marsalis wants to play for you. You should work with him. Oh, I guess if he wants to work with me,
Well,
and essentially,
hell.
Like a rom-com.
yeah, sort of pitted them.
I was just at the Broad stage, by the way, and speaking of, there is there's a picture of all the people that have played at the Broad stage, and it's Bradford Marsalis is listed there.
Bradford?
And Bradford.
Nice.
And
Well done.
it's one of the few that's there that's not signed, and I'm like,
Clearly.
Yeah.
I'm sure he was just like, hey, motherfuckers, I'm not gonna sign this.
Is
Well, there
Bear,
is,
is the Angry Video Game Nerd one? Is that the automatons?
No, actually, the automatons were made. That song, "The Automaton's Heart," was made from floppy disk drives.
Okay, see, I thought that was the case because I remember you
What do
did
you
that
mean?
sci-fi film with Paul Cartwright.
Yes,
doing
that's
like
what it came from.
Hey,
So I
love Paul.
floppy disk drives, the old 3.5-inch disk drives.
of course I know.
People have figured out how to make music out of them.
I'm sorry?
By spinning the motors in certain ways, by sending certain commands.
You haven't
They-
seen like Imperial March covered on floppy drives and stuff on
Well,
YouTube?
this is what I saw. People they'd be like, they would take my music and cover it on floppy drives. Austin, play him the first 20 seconds of this song. You'll hear it. These are floppy drives.
The automaton in the window watched her every day. As she crossed the cobblestone, she never met his cigarette gaze. Oh, how he longed to call to her, see her parasol tilt his way. Deep within his robotic heart, he knew what he wanted to say. My heart is alive, and it's open wide. Deep down inside, my heart is alive.
Fuck you, dude.
All right, man. That's the
Yeah,
idea.
I must say it's funny having gone to see you do this live. In a way, no live show could ever do justice to this record from the sheer amount of layers
Oh,
that you have
really?
in every like I was thinking about it also with the last one, where the orchestra is so, even with a live, even if you had like you were at the Bowl with a 100-piece orchestra, it's so balanced, and there's actually metal I don't think of as particularly like wide dynamic range. It tends to just be always at 11, but there's actually shockingly wide dynamic range to this album, and that
This
it actually
album
makes
is
the
the
orchestra
best
really
mix.
work.
Yeah, the
Dude.
mixer on this record is this guy Forrester Saville out of Australia who mixes for Carnival and a bunch of other like Australian progressive metal bands. But he is a magician. I understand mixing, and I do not understand how.
It's so easy for stuff to get muddy or bright. You know what I mean? And like just then, I had, first of all, we'll go back to the floppy drives, because that was like, I feel like if Aphex Twin had discovered this before, it would have been everything they ever did. But I've got like two growling guitar tones that are just eating at my earlobes without overtaking everything else. And by the way, this was for your vocals. That's not fair, dude.
That's my brother, bro.
That's
my
your brother?
That's my brother.
Dude.
That's what he brought to the party.
It is this, at
He was
first
so
I'm like,
on stage. He was so like comfortable in his skin. It's just like watching Troy perform, where you just go, somebody who just, the rest of the world doesn't exist in this moment. Brendan, really big hats off to him.
Yeah.
You know, vocally having to do so much heavy lifting on the
Yeah.
on the show. Riot too.
I'm so curious as to his influences, because I hear everything, and I hate to draw comparisons, because I mean, I don't know. For me, if somebody goes, "Hey man, I hear a lot of Buckley in you," I'm like, thank you. If you can even get smatterings of those things, then I'm happy. But I mean, there's everything from like Judas Priest to Rush. You know, I mean, I hear like some Geddy Lee without it being over the top.
My brother, he's a chameleon. First of all, he can do a lot of things,
Okay.
and he was the singer of the song in Big Mouth called "I'm Gay" that got nominated for an Emmy. He was Freddie Mercury in that song.
Oh my God!
He was Freddie Mercury on Big Mouth. That's the range
I
he
forgot
has.
that. That's so funny.
That's not fair.
Yeah, no, it's outrageous. It's outrageous. And what's funny, man, he did these demos and we've got amazing vocals. But there are times when it's like we had to go down a step. You know, because it's like, holy shit, that Brendan is in
Soaring through the stratosphere.
another range. Yeah, he's incredible. And when we do this live, I don't have Rufus Wainwright or Serge Tonkian with me, so it's like, Brendan, you're singing those tunes and your tunes, you know. So
I would be very interested. I mean, I know time is precious, but I would be very interested to hear this Rufus Wainwright tune.
Yeah, that's going to be actually.
and kind of get
I was going to start with that one.
minute or two in.
Let me just I'd love to end with that one because to me that's just like it sort of is emblematic of the whole thing in so many ways.
Great.
The one that I was gonna play before when you were sort of asking me like, well, what's your take on that? I can't remember how you phrased it, but this one to me, this is so you.
Yeah.
Man, it's so wide. Like I'm reaching back behind me to grab things. You know what I mean? And then that's right here.
The handoff, it's such a payoff. The aesthetic left, you know?
Oh!
What the fuck? Coming out of the dark, not a wanted to run from a beast covered in scars, with the heart of poison, and no time to retreat. I can't sound the alarm, the only time is now. There's a line to be drawn, and it's taking its form, on its way through the fields. I can't listen to reason, I can't be safe to be healed. It's on the edge of explosion, on the eve of the crime. The razor's edge of violence, step up, pay the sacrifice. There's a demon in me. There's a demon in me. I come to fight.
So that's a perfect.
You didn't even
in a
get
way.
to the Mongolian throat singing in the second chorus.
Well,
That's exactly it.
let me not cut it at the knees then. 1 sec.
No, play the second chorus and then a little bit of the instrumental thing that comes after, just so you hear how weird it is.
Yeah.
I'm working with a Mongolian
Dude,
folk on some of these colors.
You threw me off that cliff like
I
Dukes of
loved it.
Hazzard,
I
man.
fucking watching you do that, man. Because that's the thing, right? It's like, but what's great is you pull a stunt like that. It means when the beat does drop, it's got to be good.
Oh yeah, but oh man, they're grateful for it as opposed to expecting it. You gave them land to crash onto to blow out both.
Check out chorus 2. Check out the throat singing.
Here,
Go.
tell me if I'm.
It's more or less where you left off. A little later.
Oh shit. Okay, hold on.
Step up, pay the sacrifice.
This is chorus 1.
There's a demon in me. I come to file the shine in a rage so cruel, and a malevolent tide in a plague of wounds, and not stayed by stones, and not stopped by swords. in kind, offered by torch. It's on the edge of explosion, on the eve of the crime. The razor's edge of vines, step up, pay the sacrifice. There's a demon in me. Yeah, there's a demon in me. There's a demon in me.
Chromatic walk. Is that Paul?
No, it's a morin kur. It's a Mongolian folk instrument. All right, so you've heard all the gags, but I mean, it's a Mongolian metal band called Nine Treasures that sat in on that tune, just doing the throat singing and playing Mongolian ethnic instruments and. But yeah, man, I mean that's like I learned all that stuff on Battlestar. All those rhythms, those are Japanese.
You can totally
taiko
hear
rhythms.
you can hear the like. I don't know what the taiko term for the rim shot is, but that. To me it's funny as much as that's a traditional taiko thing. I so associate it with you because of fucking 5,000 hours of Battlestar music.
I know. I mean, I know it's so powerful, man. But that's one of those things where I had more to say. I was like, that's so fun. I want to do that, you know.
What do you do? Are you going down before you go back to the 1? Are you resolving at the 2? What is that? Because it's this cool like. Super
the
unexpected.
chords are pretty simple, right? I mean, it's like C minor, A flat major, C minor, B flat.
It's super easy, man. So I'm going to D sus 2-9.
All right, whatever. Yeah, the flat 2, man. The flat 2 is that when right before the chorus, when the drums kick in, and it's just like, but it's all because the arrangement is so weird. It takes you somewhere else. Like. Fundamentally, there was some reviewer I saw reviewing the record. I was so pleased because he goes, some people are calling this a prog metal album. There's nothing progressive about this. This guy's writing songs. Like, actually, there's a couple that are weird, but it's really like 18 of these songs are like really pretty tight.
Yeah, pop. But I think most people like...
It's symphonic and operatic, but it's not progressive, and I was like, I take that as a badge of honor, man.
That reminds me when we were at Power Trip and Tool stuck out like a sore thumb with that lineup for that exact reason, because it was like a completely different headspace, and you're clearly coming from where the rest of the guys, AC/DC and
my philosophy was sort of like, if I make can I make a concept album? Like, to me, the gold standard is The Wall, and yet it's like, why can't every song be another Brick in the Wall Part 2?
Right. I look at this and say it's people grab onto that prog metal genre type by basically trying to say the song was too long or I didn't understand it. They heard a Porcupine Tree album one time and were like, oh, got it. That's what everything falls under this banner. But to me, it is, if it's not 1, 4, 5, and it's not this, then it therefore falls into this utter category. It's almost like calling it classical music. You're like, well, what do you mean by that? It's not a British accent. What do you mean? Are you from Liverpool? Or are you from London? Are you from? You can't just say I've got this thing, and it's just kind of this catch-all. But I don't get that vibe from this at all.
For me personally, the litmus test is this, and this is something that working with my brother, he would zero in on this immediately. Are you saying this because you want to say it or because anyone wants to hear it?
Bingo.
Are you moving yourself or do you want to move other people? And I was always like, it feels really good to say what I want to say, but at the end of the day, I want to move other people. Another thing that I've seen online that is, I file under the best compliment. Our third single with Slash is 11 minutes long. And it is my homage to November Rain and Bohemian Rhapsody. It isn't a song form. It's epic. It's, you know, operatic. It's those songs. But I remember somebody saying, like, on a comment somewhere where they go, I listened to this like 3 or 4 times, and then I was like late to school because I didn't realize how long it was. And I was like, that's awesome.
That's a compliment.
It doesn't feel like it's that long. And in a way, the flex that I'm secretly trying to do here is, yes, it's an 11-minute song, but I feel like when a band like Tool does a song that's over 10 minutes, they're kind of like daring you to stick in for the whole thing.
It's can you last?
It'll be rewarding. You will enjoy it, but there's this almost antagonistic relationship where for me it's almost like I am going to use every trick I have learned in my lifetime making music to make a song that goes over 10 minutes that needs to be that long, and that pulls you in. And every time you're like, is this going to go somewhere? Ooh, what's that? Ooh, what's this? And that's why I do think it's like, it's bombastic, it's massive, it's 25 tracks, there's spoken word, it's called a concept record. At the end of the day, I think it's pretty damn accessible, man. I think it's something...
I would agree with you 100%. I would even say that people that aren't, quote, metal fans, because the problem with most metal is it just sounds like shit. You know what I mean?
Yes.
It's not mixed well. It's that you've got metal drums that are super flat. Everything is just kind of bricked off. Like you said, there's no dynamic range to it.
Dude, even just looking at the waveforms queued up here to play for you, it is all over the place. I mean, it gets down to near silence, and then it is literally a brick. But it never sounds like what you're. I was so impressed. I was curious about your mix. I don't know that guy, but holy shit, did he?
He killed it, man. And it is so. I love it when people say that they are not into metal, but they are digging my record.
You're
Even
like,
my
bitch,
daughter,
you're into metal.
She loved the show, and she was like, she started listening to the record, and she goes, these are my favorites, and on her list of favorites is by far the most brutal,
the most metal,
devastating metal track. I was like, you like that?
From
who?
You
know,
who'd you say it was?
Baby.
Who was that? You said?
My daughter. My daughter.
How old's your daughter?
She's 9.
All right. My boy just turned 6. So we got to get our kids together. And then this guy has to have a kid. Before we move into the last track, I would say it's interesting you bring up November Rain in the context of the conversation that we had, because I was, and you may know this, I was shocked to learn that if you get a few years ago they released, I think it was like 4 or 5 years ago, they released the Sound City studio sessions from Guns N' Roses. So before Appetite. Yes. And on there is a very, very early version of November Rain. And you realize that, you know, Axl Rose gets a lot of shit. And there's just some people that as singers, whatever you want to think of U2, the fact that Bono has been able to sing that like that for 40 plus years is fucking impressive.
Yeah.
But actually almost close to 50 years. But if you look at Axl Rose, what he did between 88 and 92 is goddamn unparalleled. Like, to go from Appetite and then do the Spaghetti Incident and then do Use Your Illusion 1 and 2, that to me as a songwriter was really, really impressive. And yes, he needed the production. Yes, he needed Slash. Yes, he needed Duff. Yes, he needed Matt Sorum. You needed all of those people to give it the sound that it was. But you listen to November Rain, you're like, that motherfucker can write a song, dude, and write an epic tune.
November
even
Rain,
then.
I mean, I say this all the time, that like, I didn't grow up listening to rock. I grew up listening to film music. I was a film score fan. I didn't listen to pop. I didn't listen to hip hop. I didn't listen to rock. November Rain was one of the things, and Queen was another one. When I heard pop music and went, oh, no, that's film music. That's what that is. I know what that is.
100%.
I don't care that it's on the radio.
If you listen to Estranged, if you go back and forth from November Rain straight into Estranged, you're like, damn, dude, Estranged is a lot of ways a better song, but there will never be anything like November Rain. And especially that solo, it's just from top. And that's the funny thing is you don't hear that solo until much, much later. But anyway.
Exactly. And those two, and you had Don't Cry was the third in the trilogy.
God.
Talk about concepts like based. It's like, what's it based on? It's based on that book that his friend wrote. And you're like, you're digging in and it's adding to your experience. And that ultimately is what I wanted to create. To go back to like, why did I make a graphic novel, and like, why am I making animation that you see at the show? And because I was looking at GNR, I'm looking at Queen, I'm looking at Pink Floyd, and the fun thing is you can throw this in a workout playlist and enjoy it, and that's it, and that's awesome. But if you want to dig deeper and you're like, oh, you follow the breadcrumbs and you start to experience different things, then you hear these songs differently. And ultimately, all the musicians that I admired tended to do that.
Yeah.
Right? That like when you dig below the surface, there's more there than just great songwriting. There's this storytelling and pieces that connect to other pieces. And in a way, it was like after 20 years of doing film, it was like it was exploding out of me. Like, I have to do this or I'm going to go nuts.
I love that. I have one last question. I'm going to say, well, it's not the last question. I'm sure I have 4 more, but I'm going to save my next question until after this song because I'm curious.
To that end, about the breadcrumbs, what can you say about this recurring, sort of motif that threads the whole thing? Because that obviously is one of those things that makes it truly like a concept album, and not, but just squaring that with the fact that some of this material, like you said, goes back to age 15. Is
that true for you, that the theme, that the repetition of the theme or the motif is to you what qualifies as a concept record? Because to me, it's something far more abstract than that. I can understand. I listen to Dark Side, and that's a concept record.
Well,
from
to me,
both
a concept.
Of
I'm hardly the authority, but when I use that term, it just means that there is a unifying notion, whether it's purely musically or extra musically. It could also be something more conceptual, but
would you say that that's if it should or not should, but is a bad term, but the ones that we look to as banners are typically, they do both. They have this somehow this thematically, conceptually that is demonstrated in multiple ways throughout, as opposed to just I wanted to make a concept record about X. There's this melodic thing that's also representing that notion as well.
I love that idea. And that is more rare, for sure.
Yeah.
Part of it is just, it requires an authorial vision that bands struggle with. I mean, it's like, it's at a certain point, it takes more of a composer mentality to go like,
it's more like writing a symphony
and set this up. I mean, ultimately, it's just symphonic form. It's ba-ba-ba-bum, ba-ba-ba-bum. I've now taught you something. Now, let's go have fun with it, now that you've learned it. It's so basic, right?
Here's your anchor that will always come back to make you feel like home.
So, yeah, my record opens with this thing. You hear it again several times. Slash plays it all throughout his track. And there are other connections, like the score underneath those 3 monologues are all different quotations of various things. Part of me was like, it was almost like after I'd written a bunch of great songs, I was like, how can I connect them further? And really use those skills as a composer of instrumental music, to really be in control of that kind of motivic writing in a way that like a band might struggle with. If you're in a room with 5 guys, it's hard to come up with something that intricate. And truly, the bands that do it best, Pink Floyd is really the best example. And of course, the more we learn about how that band functioned, it was like, especially by the time you got to The Wall, it's a band in almost name only. Like Roger Waters was so controlling.
Well, but also so is Dave Gilmour, right? Like,
yes.
You hear, it's like Dave is writing this. Dave is the one that's really leading forward into the sequencing, like being able to, that was all Dave Gilmour. So Roger Waters, of course, to me was the one that was, to use that as an example, from what I understand of making the regular, Roger Waters was the one of creating Pink and like making it this thing, and Dave Gilmour is going, that's all well and good, but how are we representing that in the music?
Yeah, I mean, and that's one of those, it was just the perfect confluence. It was like Sgt. Pepper. It was like
dude,
things that are so perfect that they won't last.
Yeah. Well, I'm sorry. I'm speaking more of The Wall when it comes. Yeah,
well, that's what I mean. So am I.
Yeah,
that's what I'm saying.
Dark Side was them just kind of playing jazz together, and then what do we look like outside of Sid? And then all of a sudden, The Wall is like really. I felt Roger stepping forward and being like, "This will be my thing."
that run is one of the greatest runs in popular music history. You have animals and Wish You Were Here, which are like the black sheep, right?
It's insane, dude.
Oh my God.
I skipped over Animals for a long time until I was somewhere else, and we were talking about Pink Floyd, and somebody goes, "You really should listen to Animals." I was like, "Really?" They're like, "Yeah, dude."
I mean, and
like
truly,
go back to Saucer Full of
Animals
Secrets too. Like you can go back and really listen
are all
to.
amazing. But the
They
thing
really
that
are.
it doesn't make me sad. It's just an observation about band relationships. After The Wall, arguably the greatest concept record ever made, their next record, The Final Cut, which wasn't that great, but let's take that judgment aside. Just look at the credits.
Okay.
It said music and lyrics by Roger Waters, performed by Pink Floyd. What a heartbreaking kick in the nuts. Like, it's so disgusting to me. And then they broke up, and it's like, make your own record, bro, which is what he did. And then Pink
Yeah.
Floyd went on, and they made their stuff that was fine. But never did either side approach The Wall or Dark Side of the Moon. But that's sort of
No.
like, that you realize, like, oh, The Wall was the end. Like, after that,
Yeah.
whatever balance they had to get their genius to come together was shattered forever. And in many
It's
ways,
like the difference between
what is The Wall about? It's about an artist that's sick of being up on stage.
Yeah.
So it's like, in a way, it's so incredibly transparent. And to come full circle, what makes a concept album that I've created different than most others? It's rock. There's an amazing band, but it is a benevolent dictatorship. It's not a band. It is my thing.
Yeah.
And in a way, those sort of dynamics are just different. And that's
You really
why...
feel that even with Brendan as the singer on so much of the record, it is interesting how I know I'm biased because I know your work so well. And I obviously had some insight, like we talked about this before I ever listened to it. And all, so like, I'm not a good user feedback kind of case study, but it does feel so you despite that. Despite Brendan being like, because our ears we're trained.
There's a bias toward the lead singer.
That's
and
what
honestly,
I mean.
Van
Like,
Halen was incredibly helpful in this regard. That it's like,
right.
there's a bias that the lead singer is everything.
Yeah.
And there are bands that's just not the case. And when I started this, part of me was like, can this work at all if I'm writing vocal music and I'm not the lead vocalist? And at the end of the day, I just made this because I wanted to make it. And while I call it a benevolent dictatorship, which it is, it's my name as the artist, ultimately, like, it is a partnership because I can't do this without my brother. He brings so much to the table.
Dude, there's a difference between a vanity project and there's a you going the common thread that I've seen through people who have done this when I'm like, man, it's a really good record, and other people are like, you wanted to put out a record, is the fact that you said, if I didn't do this, I was going to go crazy. Like, that to me has nothing to do with this solicitation for approval or validation. It has everything to do with, I don't give a shit. I have to get this out. This is a huge musical fart that I've got to let out.
It's
or I'm gonna
way
explode.
more expensive than therapy. So there was.
Oh yeah,
You were like, I'm going to lose my mind. I need help, so I'm just going to do this.
yeah.
But it's true. I was just, what kind of songs do I want to write? And I started writing songs by saying, imagine I'm on stage at like the Whiskey or the Roxy, and I've just got a band of some of my friends. What are the type of things that would just be fun?
Yeah.
And that was it. And the fact now that like Serge Tankian and Rufus Wainwright are on this is not what I intended when I started. But I think I appreciate your comments because I do think fundamentally, like, if I was like, I want to write a record and get famous people to sing on it, it wouldn't be as good if that's what I tried to set out to do.
No,
Frankly, they wouldn't be on it.
I was going to say, they would have
disingenuous.
seen right
They
through
would have.
it.
Yeah, they're like, no, we're good.
Yeah. No, you.
Slash isn't hurting to be on somebody's record. All right,
That's
cue up
like
this last one.
That's like doing like the wealthy Dubai private party or something, where it's like, that paycheck better be fucking epic to justify someone's vanity project. This is type 3.
That's not fair. It widens out.
You seem so far away, a maze untamed. I feel forever changed, adrift, unchained. You made your mark on me. Those things I've seen can't explain. The blinding lights, the strangest sounds. I'll never be the same. I've lost myself in you. It's space deranged. I'm pining for that place. Won't you take me back home to feel what I feel? Everything, the joy and the rage. It terrifies me so completely. I'll never be the same. Can't turn away from you.
Every single fucking track on this thing is such an anthem. It's so like there's just absolutely no. What I
Well-
love is that the filler are these beautiful monologues with this lush orchestration that it don't read that way at all. Like you phrased it, or I can't remember how you said it earlier, but those kind of like palate cleansers, because
Yeah.
then it is just like so
Every single
relentless
song,
every time. Yeah.
I wanted every track to just be massive.
First
And
of all,
action
he
and emotion.
sounds incredible.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I love the
He
spaciousness
never
of
gets
that one.
up that high. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, and he was so cool to do that. And you know, like I sent him a couple of songs. I didn't know him super well. I've gotten to know him really well over the last couple of years, but you know, I think he heard the melody. I honestly, because it's like if I had said, "Hey Rufus, will you sing my metal song?" I'd been like, "No." But that melody, he was like, "Oh, I know how to do that." You know?
And it also sounds. Sometimes a friend of mine put it this way. They're like, I always hate it when an American word gets sandwiched into another language. It's like, entonces, Budweiser, Texas Motor Speedway. It always just stands out how this is not supposed to be in there, and it would be easy for it to be like, what is Rufus Wainwright doing in a metal song? But then you hear, like the way it starts off, you contextualize it. Like there's a word you used earlier, was like it's so accessible. But then all of a sudden you go, I'll keep listening. I'm just going to add one thing on top of this.
Exactly.
And then I'm just
You
gonna
have
add
such a
one thing on top of
musician's
this.
ear. You have such a musician's ear, Troy, because it's like that's the key. That's why this was my first single. Because I was like, all the metalheads, I have stuff for you later. But for
Yeah.
people that like are curious about this and coming from my film score side, it's like I'm starting with this weird loop that sounds like something out of pop music, and then it's just Rufus. All right?
Yeah.
Lush orchestra. And then the last thing, it's like now some double kicks. But by then
Yeah.
it's like getting into a hot tub and it's like, you're good. You know?
It's very palatable, and I don't know if this is going to sound weird to you. It almost feels like it could be a Bond theme.
You're
Dude,
not
there's
the
a-
first person to say that. And
there's
there's another
another-
track that gets that comment all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah, man. That's
I could see this as an opening credit 100%.
Totally, man.
And I don't know if it's just the orchestra or what else it is.
Troy has to hear a bit of this one. Because I remember having that. Is this the one that people say that about?
This is the one my wife Rhea Yarbrough sings.
I was like, this is a lost John Barry Bond song. Like,
Well, first of all, talk about the Pink Floyd.
You've come for the answer.
that's Bear's wife singing.
It's beautiful.
The gears set to pave heaven's way. These skin bones of Athens
Okay.
were the cogs to wash the old gods away.
Again with the mix, those strings sit so comfortably there, despite
Yeah.
the fact that everybody else is pretty full.
There's not this notion of, and there's strings.
Yeah, I
it's
hate
just
that.
like they're just here.
Some 82 fragments.
No, exactly. As much as I remember us talking about S&M, how as much as I love Michael Kamen and as much as I love Metallica, they did not gel.
No.
And this does not have
the thing that I
problem at all.
love, we're just sucking you off at this point. It's the kick. You know what I mean? Like that kick should
Yeah,
be
man.
like full of just like 2K and just like, you know, flattened. It's not. It has thump. It has like.
Keep it going to the solo on this
Those
one.
arpeggios, man, are great.
Awash in the centuries, anointed in salt and decay, watched comets through fathoms like an astrolabe alone in the
There's Dave Gilmour, baby.
Who was playing that there?
That's Omer Bensby, my in-house guitarist. He's one of my writers.
Wow.
But I wrote that solo. I wrote it on keyboards, and he played it.
Amazing.
So come.
Yeah, I know I said type
I
3 would be
hear
our
what
last
you're-
one, but it's just it's irresistible. I had this one teed up to
Yeah.
originally play second.
And by the way, that's Kim Thale from Soundgarden. That's the guy from Black Hole Sun doing all those arpeggios, man. That's why it sounds so awesome.
Well, there you
Oh,
go.
and that
I didn't
the
even know
one
about
with
that.
all the taiko drums, that was Scott Ian from Anthrax playing guitars on that.
Fuck,
But
dude.
even non-featured, even just the like on the track rhythm guys are pretty stellar, man. And they bring that. That's why that song sounds different, you know?
First of all, as just like someone who has those aspirations as well, as like, man, one day I would love to have so and so on this record, like to collaborate with that person, has nothing to do with, and I feel this from you too, right, man? You've been from a commercial standpoint, you've been very successful, and there are people that I'm like, cool, they keep working, all right, and there's other people where I'm constantly rooting for them. And you are definitely the latter, not
He
the
hates
former.
you.
It says, yeah, I hate you, and I wish for your demise on a daily basis.
Yeah, man. Oh, thank you.
I feel that this is just like, man, it's an artistic endeavor. My question for you is because how old are you?
I'm 45 this year, bro.
45. Okay, so we're roughly the same age. As kids that were, introduced, well, you barely, into the 70s, and then growing up in the 80s, we saw multiple format changes, right?
Yeah.
Do you have a preferred medium for this record? Not for everything, but just for this. Is there a preferred, when you think about how you would listen to this, is it CD? Is it vinyl? Is it Dolby Atmos? Like, what is your preferred medium?
Zune.
I mean, I want to say the vinyl.
Okay.
It's available now. No kidding. But the reason is I love, or even the CD. I loved when I was a kid. I would get a record. It was like getting a gift from a friend, and the first time I listened to a record, I listened to it all, and I opened up the book.
Yeah,
I
man.
read the liner notes. I associated the imagery. I read the lyrics. After that, I'll listen to it casually.
Sure.
And in a way, the whole idea of what if I make it a concept record? What if I make it a graphic novel? What if I make it a concert experience with animation? It's all part of I'm sending you clues, people younger than us, that what I really want you to do is listen to it in order. Now that's a tall order at this point because people are probably going to grab a song and throw it on their playlist. And I'm so grateful for every person who does that. But it's like begging to be heard in order.
You don't hear the
medium
same
doesn't
way.
matter other than, if you listen to this on Spotify, that's awesome. But I would highly recommend listen to it in order. And that's the thing that the streaming and algorithm world has threatened to destroy the most. And that's why putting out an album at all, let alone a double album, is audacious. It's ridiculous.
It's a non sequitur now, and this will really quickly bleed into a different conversation. But Rick Rubin's, proselytizing for this right now. But there's definitely very much of he is an apologist for the fact that the way that technology has always dictated the way that we create art. And if you look at the kind of music that we wrote for a 4-track or an 8-track was completely different than the way that we do now with, literally unlimited colors behind you. And even, I'll never forget the first time I went to go lay my record back to vinyl, the guy looked at me and was like, you can't do this on a record. I went, why not? He goes, well, first of all, your side A is way too long. Your side B that you've listed as your side A and side B could work. He was like, but if you want me to fix this side A onto a vinyl, I'm going to have to go below industry standards for this, and you're going to roll off 6 to 8 dB of low end, and it's not going to sound right, man. And it's because conceptually or philosophically I wanted this to be on vinyl, but there's a limit to that medium. And so we wrote songs differently. So that's why I asked, what is your preferred medium for this? And there is... For me, it automatically goes. I remember the first time that I listened to vinyl. I remember the first time I listened. And I wish that I could find the sample of the bias sound that a tape would play at the very, very beginning, because I tie that to certain records that I was listening to at the time. And then the first time that I had a CD and just listening to the crystalline perfection of that medium. Because even there, yes, you could skip the tracks, but there was less of the persuasion to do that.
Sure.
And we had AMS. I don't know if you remember that or not, but that was an automatic music search. You could push the button AMS and it would fast forward to the next song. So we've been constantly trying to do this. Even the needle, you could pick it up and put it down in the next groove. The thing that no matter what the medium is, there's always the struggle with, can I hold you captive for 44 minutes or 125 minutes? Can I keep you in this space for this amount of time? And that will be the perennial, eternal fight from the artist to the audience.
Absolutely. And I can say, that was my starting point, which is why ultimately the medium doesn't matter as much to me, because I wrote it thinking every second of this record, and my brother and I have listened to it and said, does this need to be here? every second of it has been tested, and we believe we've made a really strong record that does hold your attention. And in a way, I love albums, man. I love listening to albums, and I still listen to albums.
Me too.
But I if there's one person out there who's a fan of mine that goes, all right, Bear, you've made a comic book, and all right, I'll listen to these in order. Geez, I would feel like hugely validated, right? That like, because most people don't listen in that way anymore.
And then for that person to go back and listen to Dark Side, sit and do nothing else. My friend Travis Willingham, I made him do this once. I was like, you're going to sit in this chair, you're going to put on these headphones, you're going to listen to Dark Side, and in 22 minutes, that needle's going to cross over to the other side. You're going to pick up the record, you're going to flip it over to the B side, and you're going to continue the journey. That's what this was designed to do. And to have a relationship with music, that's why I don't worry about AI. Is if we could do what you're doing, if we can have this conversation with people, it's not about the creation of it. It is about the intention of it.
If anything,
if you have an experience with it, then you won't worry about all of these new technologies.
you just gave me a thought. It could end up being that AI ironically ends up fueling more things like this, because what happens is people go, all right, when I'm at the gym, that's when I can have my algorithmically generated sort of, I just need a steady beat. I just need a steady, I'm not really listening. I just, or when I'm in the car or when I'm on the bus or whatever. And it makes more precious when you actually go to listen to something that somebody made and put all of their blood, sweat, and tears into. And so in a way, it makes these kinds of things stand farther apart, because you don't use them in a utilitarian way in your life, to soundtrack your day-to-day.
I think that this will actually bring about a renaissance of the live experience, which was very anemic and gasping for breath, because you have tickets that are $3,000 to go see the show you're supposed to go see.
Did you see the news today or yesterday about
Ticketmaster?
Live Nation?
Ticketmaster and LiveMaster? Bye-bye.
Yeah, it's like every musician I know is like long overdue, man. So
Dude,
yeah, I think that's totally true. And in many ways, this project for me, the Singularity, was me recognizing that I had reached a level of success in film and TV and games that if there's other stuff I want, I have to get it elsewhere. And it's those things you're talking about, the album format, the live experience, collaborating with musicians without having to answer to anyone else, and ultimately challenging myself to write music without the safety net of like, you got to write music for Lord of the Rings, but it's like, it's Lord of the Rings. Like, it's pretty inspiring, man. Like, there's some pressure there, but ultimately it's like, if you have skill, that's an incredible inspiration.
But also in that,
I wanted to do some trapeze swings without it.
It shows, dude, because in this, I see now what you're talking about is this is far more dangerous. Because if you're talking about Lord of the Rings, you have all of these fail safes and safety guards of them going, no, it doesn't belong. But the conversation you had with Brennan, which is, man, does this really belong on the record? You have to make that decision. You have to be judicious. And that's, to me, far more of a challenge than even writing for the biggest scores ever.
Absolutely. And Austin and I have talked at length about this before, where we've gotten really good game faces when someone comes up and they go, oh my God, that piece you wrote for that thing moved me so much. And we're thinking, I hate that cue.
Yeah.
I hate that cue.
That's
Like,
the
idea.
the
I was
version
exhausted.
7 where
And then
they-
part of me was like, I have to remember, be
Really?
happy.
That's the one?
They like it. But it ultimately, you know what I mean? It's like, that's what's funny, right? It's like, that's what I talk about with the safety net. Because even if you don't do a good job, people are predisposed to like music if they like the thing. So it's like the more they hear it, it's like it grows on them.
It's
and that's
Stockholm
awesome. And there's
syndrome.
pitfalls with that.
For sure. That's why I call it demo love. And I feel it's like the fact that you've held on to some of these things for 15 years and are able to bring, I'm sure that's not the only one that you had the tape of. It's easy to fall in love with that version. But man, what you proved, here's what can happen when I actually take this thing that's been gestating for this amount of time, for 25 years, and then hand it over to the spirit of collaboration.